The first speaker is our esteemed director, Nikhil, who has led this effort for Georgia Gov Interactive, moving to Drupal and making all of the improvements to the platform. He's going to be talking about creating a digital ecosystem for Georgia. So if you all would join me in a round of applause for our director, Nikhil Deshpande.
I am so thrilled. Like Peter said, this is the most we've had as far as GOVTalks sign-ups so far, and super excited to also have a lot of agencies attend who are not on the platform. So, I think it's going to be an amazing conversation. And I want to talk about a little bit what we do for some of the agencies that are not working with us already. So Georgia Gov Interactive is, a web publishing platform where we help agencies with their websites. But we don't just help with, hey, here's a platform you can host your website. We call ourselves partners, and we work with them, and we truly, help out with making sure that the digital presence for every agency is maximized, and they get the most benefit out of, their web presence. So it goes way beyond just technology. Now, what it actually helps with, doing that with every agency is that it kind of gives us a good view of what every agency is trying to do. And this is why I wanted to talk about a digital ecosystem. And I'm sure you all have heard about ecosystems and digital ecosystems. A lot of the private sector companies are doing it already. But when we look at the public sector, especially around government, we see a lot of silos. We still see a lot of these disconnects where I just want to kind of have, a conversation started. And this is not just a presentation in my mind. This is really something I would love to, talk to each of you and see how your agency can come together and look at this as an enterprise. So when we talk about digital ecosystems, right, one of the reasons why we want to create an ecosystem is we want to always have to address our day-to-day challenges. And those challenges are never the same. Otherwise, we would create a process for it. But whenever we have a challenge, the superhero in us comes out, right? We want to go address that challenge. We want to go make sure we deal with it. And the whole, superhero concept is pretty much from the early 1900s, where there is a threat that, is identified that's going to affect people. The superhero learns about it, goes and neutralizes that threat, right? But that's a very reactive approach. Yes, it's definitely needed in many cases, but most of the superheroes are reactive, right? The ecosystem concept of dealing with issues or dealing with threats is the opposite. It's more serene. It is more a holistic approach of making sure we have an environment that's created that at many places neutralizes these frictions that could possibly happen, so we don't have to put our capes on and go and address that one particular problem. Now, ecosystems, as we know, obviously, come from like the whole ecology, and all of us took that subject in school, so I'm not gonna, talk about that. I want to talk about like that ecosystems, as we know, are different kinds, right? We look at all these ecosystems around us, and we look at it as a whole picture. We look at it as a compilation of all these elements. But if we look really close into these ecosystems, we can tell that there is a story to be told. There are elements, there are characters, there are interactions. And once that becomes pretty obvious, it actually gives us a good idea of like, how can you plan for this? How can we plan these interactions? How can we plan to make sure that the system that we're trying to create really kind of works for everybody? Because one of the things, right, for an ecosystem, and this goes for any kind of ecosystem, depending on, who is part of which ecosystem, is that there are multiple elements. There are multiple elements. There are environmental issues that nobody can control. No two different elements can actually be interdependent, that they can control each other. They kind of have to work with everything. Each of them have their own roadmaps, right? So ecosystems, as we see, are a whole. But when we start really looking at these elements, we can start identifying, okay, there are these forests, there are these rainforests, deserts, all kinds of different ecosystems like a pond. But when we go beyond looking at the sum of the parts, we start looking at the elements, right? So for example, this forest did not just happen. It did not just happen in a week or a month or even a year or even a decade, right? It's the work of like hundreds of thousands of years that actually resulted into all these trees and plants and all these animals who feed on these trees and plants and other animals who feed on those animals. And the cycle goes on, right? This forest would not have happened without like the tiniest creature to that little squirrel who is kind of half cut off, to that bear, right? Because they all are part of the geography and the geology of this place. This forest would not also have happened without someone's rookie efforts of learning Photoshop. I found this online. I did not put it together, but I thought this was a digital segue for me. So, my first aha moment about understanding ecosystems was when I bought my first MP3 player. This was way back, almost 15 years ago. This was a Sandisk. The one I actually owned looked a little older than this. This is a little fancier. But it was awesome, right? I could put my MP3s in it. I could play songs. I could, have my playlists. I could also add memory. I could actually see video files in it. Not that I could, it didn't have a camera, but I could see video files. If you remember, like 15 years ago, that was a huge deal. Oh my God, like tiny screens showing videos. Awesome. Now, I didn't buy this for all those capabilities. I bought it because that's all I could afford. That was like the second best MP3 player in the market. The first best was a Microsoft Zune. All right, anybody had ever owned a Microsoft Zune or a Sandisk? All right, three hands, good. All right, 3-4 hands. All right. Has anybody ever owned an iPod? Of course, everyone, right? Here's the thing though. When they introduced iPod first generation, it actually was an inferior quality technology compared to the Zunes and the Sandisks. The Zune and the Sandisk were already using flash hard drives where people used to just run with their MP3 players. You couldn't do that. I mean, you could, but you were told you would damage it because there was a spinning disk in the first generation iPods, right? But still, iPod was able to capture 75% of the market. How did they do that? They did that not just by launching that one product, they also launched this with it. Here's a free piece of software that you can manage your entire music library. The biggest difference between the iPod and the other MP3 players was the other MP3 players were limited to what you could do with the space. With this, you could have all your CDs digitized into MP3s and you can manage them. From a user experience perspective, this was an extra click or multiple clicks for someone to actually update their music libraries, but that's okay. Because people felt like this is more than just an MP3 player. And that's exactly what Apple was going at. They were thinking of an ecosystem. They were thinking of something that was bigger than just their products. And they didn't just stop at awesome product designs, right? This resulted into an iPod being a fashion statement. Like, they were the ones to introduce these white headphones. People like me who couldn't afford iPods had those headphones going into my pocket in a Zune or my Sandisk, right? The moment I bought my first iPod, I wanted to show it to everyone. How many products do we feel like, showing off when we buy something? It's pretty rare, right? It's like, I never approach anyone saying, hey, you want to see my Sandisk? No, we just don't do that, right? Like, no one has ever approached me saying, hey, do you want to see my Samsung? Is that the exploding kind? Please no. But here's the thing, right? They made it cool. They made this ecosystem where people just couldn't, say no, because once I have one product, I start using this ecosystem. I start using iTunes. The best part about, again, iTunes is like I could buy music out there. I don't have to buy albums. I could just buy singles, right? And 99 cents a pop, when they started really kind of selling all that music, they started selling about 2 billion songs every year. That's a good bit of change. With a company that had no history in the music industry, suddenly became the largest music player in the market because they were thinking of an ecosystem. And it didn't stop there, right? Any product that they launched after went and fit right in their ecosystem of the rest of the products. The first iPad that they launched didn't have a camera. Everyone called it a glorified iPod Touch. But still they sold millions of pieces. And this is why. This is the genius, right? Because they were just trying to create products. They were not trying to tell you how to create content, but they were giving you every possible way to store and share that content. And they didn't just stick it with the product side of it. They were the geniuses who decided, I'm going to bypass the middle person, the Best Buys and the Radio Cities of the world, and we're going to open our own Apple store. And they directly started selling these products, taking away all the percentage that all these middle people were getting. Genius. To the point that people who work in those Apple stores were actually called genius. Right? When your work title says genius, you really want to go work there because like bragging rights at the Thanksgiving table, come on. But, all right, good for Apple, right? Awesome. We are not Apple. Come on, man. What do? This is the state. But like I said, there are different kinds of ecosystems. We don't need to compete with Apple with products. They already are doing that. We can create an ecosystem about content, right? We can create an ecosystem for all the services that we are offering. There are so many ways we could be looking at how we interconnect, because ecosystems don't just stop at various channels. They also look at how these different channels interact with each other. University of Oxford defines an ecosystem that a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. If we were to just apply this concept to the digital realm, let's keep the keywords intact. And when we start looking at it from just a perspective of community, interactions, and environment, we start looking at, okay, then we have our first major element to think about, which is a community. We have all kinds of players, right, in the community. And I'm just talking now a government community. We have pretty much identified any Georgian or any person who is interested in our information services to be part of our community. This is who our target audience is, right? It's everybody who's walking down the street. But if we carefully look at this community, we can also tell that there is a big part of our community where we have people who need specific services, who need specific information. Not everybody needs everything. So if we break this community into two parts, we can safely say that there are some people who are part of our internal community, and there are some people who are part of our external community. Our internal community constitutes of the lawmakers, people making policies, then agencies like us who are executing those policies and those laws into managing programs and services. There are people who are enabling those programs and services with technology. There are people who manage content. But there's also an external community where we have citizens. We have different groups. This is the website for Veterans Affairs. Anybody seen this before? VA.gov, yep. It's a nice looking site, right? Anyone who just looks at it from the outside, just the way we would look at an ocean or a pond, it looks like, oh, that's good, looking good. Good picture, good amount of content up there. But they actually started talking to people and observing how they use this, and then they realized that the experience is extremely fragmented. They have more than 1,000 websites. This is just the front face of it. They have more than 1,000 websites. They have about 900 1-800 numbers. They have about 200 call centers. And people are just scrambling, trying to find the right information. And they were like, we need to do something about this because this is not done, right? So the first thing that they did was they tried to understand who is it that is using this site and what are they looking for. Again, we can't just say all veterans are looking for everything, right? And this is where we're going to have a persona workshop later on today. But they went through this persona stage, and they were able to really kind of pinpoint on, okay, majority of the people are looking for these services. So what they started doing was they redesigned veterans.gov without moving the live website. They launched the new website as vets.gov. And they're slowly trying to consolidate everything. They're trying to create a more unified experience for all the veterans. Looks like most of the veterans were looking for jobs, healthcare, and education. They put it right in front. They saw people were really not that crazy about images, about specific images with subtext under it. They did want to have some imagery, but not something that would occupy and replace the real content. And then they started placing other sub-blocks down there. But this was the majority of the content that their people were seeking. This is a pretty brave approach compared to what they have already to change that. But what they already are seeing, that they are now seeing a lot of traffic here because it's just easy to use. So understanding that community is really important, because the first site was not designed for the external community. It was not. It was designed for the internal community. Somebody wanted to put something up there, and they went with it. But when they stopped and when they looked at the big picture, they decided, nope, we actually need it, for our external people, not for the internal people. The next big part of an ecosystem is the environment. It's a pretty huge piece, but again, this is something that we can control, as you can see, right? Apple puts out all these products, so does Android. You don't know who is using your website using which device. So clearly, from an ecosystem perspective, we can only assume at this point, by looking at the usage patterns, is that at this point, most of our traffic's coming from desktops and the laptops and tablets and mobile devices. We have a really good talk right after my talk about channels. So this really kind of aligns with, these are the channels, right? Your website is your channel. Your social presence is another channel. But because we have a dedicated talk about it, I'm not going to get too deep into this. But at this point, we happen, and this is the internal community when I say, happen to really obsess more on how a website looks on my screen, on a desktop. But that is just one instance of someone pulling up our websites. What happens when these websites start showing up on these different kind of devices, different sizes? We have certain ways to put things in it. As far as the structure, we launched the whole responsive design effort. Everyone who is on the platform, your sites are responsive. So regardless of the device, your sites pretty much rearrange the content to show to the best user experience for the person using that device. But the content really needs to be placed in a way that it can accommodate. Because devices are always going to keep flooding the market. This is just something we can control. We can have in our hands and touch. But then slowly, as we are seeing, cars are coming up with a browser. Now, it's a different conversation if they should be, right? But there's a good chance someone will be using your website if they are driving, looking for, a location near them. Who knows? Everyone has a different use case, right? So there are different screens in different places and people in different situations when it comes to the environment part of your community. But also screen sizes, right? It's not the user's problem that they have a small screen size. It's our problem. It's a problem that we solve with content. We have to make sure that our content really scales. And this is still screens. This is something the user can see. As all of us know, there are these devices now flooding the market with no screens. These are just conversational pieces. It actually is a great accessibility tool for people who are not able to see things and depend on the browser to read them out. They don't have to be sitting by a computer. They can just walk up in the room and say, hey, Alexa, tell me blah, blah, blah. And Alexa goes and, pretty much gives them the needed information. Where does that information come from? It comes from a place where we create that information. And if that information is not created the way Alexa can actually respond to a question, then we're going to have a disconnect. We're going to have a disconnect, and this is where the last but the most important part of an ecosystem we have to focus on are interactions. Interactions essentially happen at every touch point. Even today, someone using your website is interacting with your website. Someone using your application on the web is interacting with your website, with that application. If they don't see something, or by habit, they can just pick up a phone and call the 1-800 number. They have an interaction going on with you. If they walk into a physical location and talk to someone, the someone helping them might be looking at some information based on a knowledge base, which could be pulling from a website. So if we plan these interactions coming from the same place, we can really control the message. But for that, the whole aspect of looking at this from a holistic perspective needs to be considered. When we look at interactions, we see majority of our citizen goals, and this is based on a real survey we did, 60% of the citizens look for services. They either need to get something renewed or apply for something, and the rest 40% are looking for information. And we can all agree that the kind of information that we host on our websites, many times are pretty critical, that affects lives of citizens. So we cannot take our content lightly. We have to really kind of, ask ourselves every time we publish something, is this the best we can do as content people? Because that content is actually your mouthpiece that's creating this impression on the citizens. That's your website or your application is the face for your agency, right? So you have to be really kind of careful about how we put something out. What are we doing? What are we saying? In the usability circles, there is this one exercise. It's called the salt and pepper test. So I'm going to ask you, if you happen to see this, which one would you think is the salt? So if you think the one on the right is salt, raise your hands. Okay? If you think the one on the left is salt, raise your hands. It's about an equal divide, actually, which is good. So the real answer is it doesn't matter. What matters is what the person who fills these with salt and pepper thinks, right? So now we're talking about mental models. Is the person filling the one on the right with salt or pepper thinks this is what it should be, then that's what it's going to be. And this is where the disconnect happens when people start looking and like, oh, that's not what I was looking for. I clicked in the wrong link. But instead of just taking a step back and understanding what people are looking for, what we do is, oh, wait, that's not working? Let's make it clear. Let's put salt and pepper on it. Now we are adding one more layer between the user and the content. But then we also not, sometimes understanding that this is only clear to the people who understand these two words. What if they don't, right? And I'm not just talking about salt and pepper, I'm talking about terminology. I'm talking about this overall content when it comes to when we say government speak, right? A lot of times, like I've seen on the websites, acronyms and some of these terms that are not really explained well. And these create barriers. And what happens is people are just looking for services or they're looking for information, and what they see are welcome messages or things that they're not looking for, and they see that as a barrier between what they want and what they're looking for, right? So when I am actually needing something, in this case, I'm hungry and I have this egg in front of me, I'm just looking to see which one is salt and pepper. I want to see straight up which one is salt and pepper. I don't want anything in between me and that content. I don't want anything telling me. So here's kind of, where we need to do. We need to fill that gap as content people. And this is not just the content that gets published. This is also the content that your website kind of rides on, which is we also call as metadata. This is the Google page. When I put DMV, this is what I get, right? Now, none of us in this room is part of the decision-making process that changed that name. But we call it in Georgia DDS, Department of Driver Services. But someone moving into Georgia, if they just put DMV in there, this is what shows up. All of the first 4 links are showing that, okay, there's a website, dmv.org. Like, okay, you go there, you click on any of it, none of it actually takes you to the right website. None of it. They take you to this website, which looks just like, any website that could be a DMV website. Although they have it up here, clear that, ooh, this is not your real website, right? None of the pictures, people are not looking for these icons of the pictures, they're looking for text. They're looking for, hey, this is the DMV since blah, blah, blah. We are simplifying processes and things for you. You can use this and pay us. So if we do our job of, making sure that we create a structure, we create a website such that when someone puts in DMV, we show up. And this is just an example. There's, so many others, but this just seemed like this is true. And, we need to make sure the structure helps. It's not just about the people, it's also about these search engines, because search engines are our major users. Google, honestly, is going to be, or if not already, our homepage. we can assume everyone just goes to our homepage and then goes to some of the subpages, is going to be Google. But unstructured content looks like this to Google. That's why we need structure, right? Because once we create structure, we can innovate on it. We can actually do much better things with it. I don't know how many of you have seen this, but a couple of years ago, TurboTax came up with an app. They sucked in all the content.
This year, make your taxes a snap with the SnapTax app from TurboTax. Just snap a photo of your W-2 and it automatically imports all your info and fills in all the right places.
All the right places is the keyword, right? If we create structured content, and we have a talk coming up about structured content that really kind of gets deep in this, this happens. Like, this is awesome, right? Like, this wasn't new. We had W-2s, we always took pictures, but the moment we start combining those, this became innovation because the content was structured. It wasn't just a pile of numbers and words. And this is, again, structure is not new. We always did this. We always required people to put content in a structured form. We just need to translate that into a digital form now. So anyway, to sum up, we need to start thinking about websites not in terms of pages. We need to start thinking about websites as part of content that can be pulled through APIs and can be distributed everywhere. It's really time for us to unleash this content. Open it up, let other people use it. It's sitting on our site, but it's also really fluid, right? Because that's how we deliver our citizens. We don't expect them to always come to our sites. If someone wants to take our content and use someone, sure, do that. So when we create our ecosystem, we have to be really careful about making sure how these interactions are planned, right? And as government, we can absolutely create a content-based ecosystem because the rest of the devices, the rest of the infrastructure is already built for us. So some of my takeaways are, we really need to design, regardless of visual design or content design, for our citizens, not for our organizations, right? Let's be device agnostic. Let's not design for my screen or your screen or someone else's screen. Let's design for content. Let's design for the user. And regardless of the screen that they pull up in, if we have done our job, it should work just fine. Keep content simple. We really need to, just be simple and straight, and it works. People don't pick up the phone if they understand what they read on websites. We also need to create opportunities for dialogues, right? Our website's not just something we upload and done. We need to know how it's been used, what people are thinking. So let's open that channel. And last but not the least, Google, Alexas are going to be our home pages going forward. So we need to, anything that we do, anything that we decide to do on our website, we need to be thinking about how it's going to pan out from a big search engine perspective or an interface that does not have a visual. It's all conversational. That was all. Thank you.